Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We finally settled on a title, I guess. So, welcome to another episode of the Tangentially Related Podcast. I'm Calvin,
I'm Zach.
and let's just jump into it. So, you might have realized we didn't actually mention a title in the first few episodes because we were kind of getting off the ground and trying to figure things out.
We did not know.
Yeah, we really didn't know, but hey, we have a title now, so that's cool.
We had a cool little doc which had a bunch of different names. We found one that was good, and then when I looked up the name, apparently 2 or 3 other YouTube channels had it, but none of them were incredibly large. That would have been an issue. So maybe if we get large enough, we'll trademark it or something.
Yeah, we're stealing it. It's ours now.
Yeah. Well, when I looked it up, I also saw a bunch of different math videos as well that weren't the name of the channel. It was just names of concepts, like when something is tangentially related to something else, right? So that was first as a red flag, and then now we have it. So hopefully we keep the name. Hopefully no one comes back and says, "Oh, we have to change the name of the podcast." Plus, it's early on. You can always change it later on anyway. It's not a huge issue at this point.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? We're getting things off the ground, kind of, and we're kind of learning as we go. There was one thing that you kind of don't realize, or there are some things you don't realize when you're comfortable talking in front of a crowd, but in front of a mic and just with your friend, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, when there's because right now it's just me and you. We're across from each other at this table in this place in Toronto, and then but when you're in a crowd, you get constant feedback. You get constant feedback from the crowd about whether something lands or not. I'm going to take it from 2 different perspectives. There's the comedian perspective, where if you know a joke bombs, you know immediately, right? If a comedian tells a joke on stage and it doesn't pan out and it's not funny, they get that immediate feedback from the crowd, right?
Yeah, it's getting stage presence is a big part of it, and that stage presence doesn't come across on mic as well, because you'll probably notice this as we go along, but we're just going to keep saying the same phrases to start a sentence. That's something that really you have to train out of you, and that's something you don't get used to as much when you're just in front of a crowd versus in front of a mic.
Yeah, and you sometimes see that when you do give presentations and you give big speeches, right? Whether you want to call them TED Talks or lectures or
seminars or
seminars, exactly,
in academia.
Yeah. Exactly, in academia, right? So you don't get it's less about the noise feedback that you get from the crowd. It's more about you have to actually look at the crowd and see how the crowd is engaging. Are they taking notes? Are they on their phones? Are they watching intensely? Are they back on their seats, kind of snoozing a bit, right?
Yeah, man, that was something that with the pandemic made things kind of hard, right? Because I'm pretty comfortable in front of a crowd, generally speaking, and especially I'm kind of in academia right now, so I still get around and do seminars and stuff. And when I first got back into in-person lecturing seminars and stuff after the pandemic, everyone was still in their mask, right? And that's something that actually hides a lot of your face. And so it's kind of hard to get that feel from the crowd, when you have that, and that was really difficult to kind of get used to.
Yeah, you can see the person's eyes, but how many muscles are in the human mouth or whatever? It's the old saying.
I should know this.
Exactly. Well, it's the old saying where it takes more muscles to frown than to smile, right?
Yeah.
I forget, but and the saying has a number to it, but that's the idea, right? So there's a ton of different emotions that you get when you look at the person's mouth. It's the same thing with animals, right? If you look at a dog or a cat, for example, you can tell generally how the dog's feeling, not by the eyes, right? When you look into the eyes, it's more about its facial expressions. And that's what you miss when people are A, wearing masks, and B, when you're in a crowd itself. That's why whenever they talk about presentation skills, they always talk about, if you have slides on the board, you shouldn't be reading off the slides, because everyone can read the slides in front of you. They're here to hear you present everything that's based on the slides as well as other information as well. And that is why they tell you not to look at the slides all the time, because you actually have to look at the crowd and engage as you're presenting. How's the crowd reacting to this? And sometimes you have to make on-the-fly decisions to do a quick change-up, right?
Yeah, and that's something that kind of comes with experience, and I kind of had to relearn that, kind of going through the everyone has a mask, right? And so now it's it's a little bit harder. Students are a little bit less expressive, especially when they're just like super tired from all everything.
Well, if they're tired, there's nothing you can get around that.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, it was like a readjusting period, right? And I hadn't felt that in a long time, right? So I don't know. Like I've got a lot of stories of how I got really comfortable in front of a crowd. I don't know about you, Zach. How long did it take you to kind of get comfortable enough talking in front of a crowd?
It depends on the crowd. Depends what I'm talking about. For me, very early on when I was like a kid, like in elementary school when they first started trying to get you to do that sort of stuff, and then in high school, it was more about getting out of that shyness because I was a bit of a shy kid growing up, and I had to just grow out of that. And then nowadays, it's less about how I feel in front of a crowd. It's more about what am I talking about in front of the crowd and how confident am I in talking in front of it. If I'm going up to like, I say for example, when I was a quote unquote teacher or I don't know, like assistant for one of the university courses, when I was going up and talking to people, I was fine because I knew the content. When I go up and give presentations, I had to actually do a couple presentations at my workplace to a bunch of
the business talks.
Well, it's not business talks. It's more about we're learning off each other. So the R&D team in our workplace wants to know a little bit more at the engineering and the sales side of it because they don't see that a lot of the time. The problem with a lot of workplaces is that everything can be very siloed, and so I knew them from when I internship there, and they said, "Hey, we want to know more about the process because we're trying to better our product, and the only way to better know our product is to know how you use them in the field." So I gave them a whole presentation about it, and my boss thought it was a great idea, and in that case, I was completely fine, even though it wasn't about the people I was in front of. Like the people who are in front of were very knowledgeable, and they asked some very eye-opening questions. I was like, man, I did not know that. This is a very good experience. I did not know. Let me get back to you, right? But because I knew the content so well, it was just like a breeze. It was just like I'm talking with anyone on every other day. My biggest concern is always when I go into something that's a little bit unknown.
Oh, really? Okay, so here's the thing, right? So I've told this to a bunch of people who have asked, like, what are some ways for me to break out of my shell, get more comfortable in front of a crowd? So this is a challenge that I can do for better or worse, right? And it's the art of making stuff up and sounding confident. So if you had like a challenge to stand in front of, say, I don't know, we'll make it really big, like 1,000 people, and you had to pull a topic out of the hat on the spot and then talk for 15 minutes, would you feel comfortable doing it?
Yeah. Like because I know the subject.
No. Again, it could be anything. So it could be about like quantum mechanics. It could be about like your job. Anything.
I thought you mentioned that it's something that I had to know about though.
No.
Oh, it's anything?
Anything. It could be about like prejudice. It could be about like a murder case. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
They pull a random topic out and talk for 15 minutes.
I thought you said something that I actually know about that I can talk about for 15 minutes.
Absolutely not. Or else that would be easy.
Oh, no. if it's something unknown, then yeah, I'd be completely inadequate in my presentation skills because I just don't know. Oh, already starting with the burps. Because I just don't know the topic. And if someone asks a question and I can't give a reasonable answer back, then what's the point of me giving the presentation, right?
Well, okay, here's the thing though, right? It's not so that you can so like the thing is, it's not about you like giving a good presentation, right? It's about you feeling comfortable on stage and being able to get over that like shyness and that nervousness that a lot of people say they have when they're like getting in front of a crowd for the first time.
Yeah, but the shyness is one thing, right? Shyness is just something that everyone's a little bit shy based on their own personality, and they have to kind of they eventually get broken out of that through school and through life in general, right? It's not something that even if you have it as a kid and you're having troubles with dealing with whether you want to call it social anxiety or you want to call it just not good at talking in front of people, that eventually has to get grown out of because otherwise you just can't deal in a regular social life, in a regular day-to-day life, right? You can't work properly because you can't deal with people around you, and you can't interact with higher-ups because they're going to ask you straightforward questions. They don't want you to send it in an email. They want to talk to you face-to-face, right? But the main thing that they need to learn with the situation you talk about, which is 15 minutes of anything you can talk about, is that if I don't know the subject, then of course I'm going to be bad at presenting. Of course I'm going to be...
Well, that's not necessarily the case, right? So here's the thing, right? I've actually coached some people of how to speak in front of a crowd and how to be a bit more comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, a lot of people hyper-focus on what they need to say to the point where, oh, they're basically trying to recite a script. And at that point, that goes against everything that we talked about of trying to like vibe off the crowd, get energy from the crowd, see how they're going and adjust, right?
Yeah. And like that's why we talk about like, when you're first teaching how to do talks and speeches, you don't have a script in front of you. You have what is it, cue cards? Are they called like flat quote unquote cards, right? That you kind of go around. Even I didn't like using them when I was in school because I like them for going back down to check a general note and then moving on from there. But if you know your stuff, you shouldn't really need them. And if I don't know the subject, then there's nothing for me to talk about. Because basically what you're talking about, you're trying to be a salesperson. You're trying to BS your way
yes
through
and no.
the
Yes and no,
conversation.
right? Yes and no. So there's actually like a lot of videos about how you can basically like make a very compelling sounding speech literally talking about nothing. In fact, there's a lot of TED Talks about this too, right?
And I agree. And I agree that you can. Anyone can. That's called like, it's called being a snake oil salesman, right?
Oh boy.
Like there's an entire board game on that. What's it called? I think it's literally called Snake Oil, where the entire premise of it is exactly what you're talking about, which is you have certain people, like you have one person as like the customer, all right? And you have to go, and everyone else at the time is a snake oil salesman. And the idea is that you're given a card that has something random on it. It'll be like an item, some sort of idea, anything like that, right? And it's your job in the game to sell that item to the customer. And whoever has the best sales pitch gets a point. And whoever at the end of the game has the most points basically wins, right? It's similar like, Cards Against Humanity.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's the idea. Now, does that help with your speaking skills? No. All you're doing is BSing your way through.
I argue yes, actually.
Really?
Because here's the thing that I look out a lot for when it comes to trying to like coach people to try to like talk in front of a crowd, right? It's just there are a lot of subtle things. Like, for example, if they continuously say that's something that you can pick up pretty quickly, right? And there's comfort in stage presence that you don't necessarily need to have like a proper topic in order to like exude, right? I could literally stand in front of a crowd, right? Say, I have nothing to give. And again, there's a TED Talk that I reference all the time. It's like, I have nothing to promote here. I have nothing to sell. I'm just saying stats, numbers, facts, 3.14, whatever. But in the manner that I'm speaking, that is actually what I'm trying to get across. And through that, I can convince you as if you've learned something. And so it's not necessarily that like I am content-wise trying to bullshit you. It is the fact that I want to get people to feel comfortable on stage so that they're not just like, oh, what was the next word I was supposed to say? And they're very rigid.
Yeah. Well, when you're speaking about like, if you go to that example they had for TED Talk, where if I'm just spitting facts, so to speak, right?
Not even spitting facts. They're spitting literal numbers. I have a fact, and that's like a fact.
Yeah, no,
and
that's fine, right? But that's the thing. They still have the content, right? It's not like they're making up the number.
They don't. They literally don't.
So what's the point then? So you're telling me that they're getting on stage, you're speaking a number for some idea or something that's going on in the world, saying like, oh, this thing is happening in the world.
Nope, not even. They just get up on stage and say, I have a fact. I have a number. I'm going to give you a number. This is how I'm going to present it. I'm about to tell you this story. And they don't actually tell the story. They just pretend to.
Oh, well, that should be hopefully seen through. I mean, that's...
Again, the goal isn't to necessarily give the content, but it is to satirically kind of show that there are a bunch of like things that you can kind of point out about like a quote-unquote good TED Talk.
If I watch a TED Talk that said like that and they never got to the story, I'd be kind of pissed off. Well, because I came to the presentation. I understand what you're saying now. The idea is you're trying to get comfortable, and you're trying, and there should never be. And I think maybe your point of view of I'm going to do something random like talk about something that I have no idea what it's about on stage or in front of a group of people is a better way to get at that whole rolling off the cuff, going with the flow, vibing with the crowd or vibing with the tune of the presentation to make sure you're a little bit more relaxed. That way you're no longer in between the two. You're in between the two extremes of I am reading off a script and looking nowhere else, and I'm just going word for word, like reading out of a book essentially, versus I'm going so off the cuff that you're not going to understand what I'm talking about, and in what I'm talking about is nothing. It's nothing else. You got to be somewhere in the middle. And I guess for training purposes, yes, you can do that either side of it, because if you just read off a script, it gets you an idea of how proper speaking is done.
So if you basically recite a script, right? So let's assume you don't have anything in front of you. You just memorized it, and then you're just kind of speaking it out, right?
Yeah.
Then because you've memorized it, you have content to give.
Yeah.
Right? And on the other extreme, when you're just kind of effectively bullshitting on stage, going like, I have numbers, I have facts, and just like, again, vibing off the energy, you have no content, but you have stage presence, and you have like ability to resonate with a crowd, right? And so yeah, we want to meet in the middle, but for training, you kind of have to like get a bit of both, right?
Anyone who's really good at the latter that you just said should be a salesperson. The amount of salespeople who I talk about who are like are just trying to get me into something without actually proving anything, without actually saying anything to begin with, is just obscene.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of take it with a pinch of salt, of course, and it's mostly satire, like when they put it out. But.
Well, I'll give you another example. So I was talking with one of our salespeople at my company, and I didn't realize, and she's pretty good. She's a really good salesperson who gets us a lot of jobs and is able to work with a lot of the reps really well. But when I talked with her one time before going to a client meeting, I didn't realize how much she did not know about the company itself. Like, she's fairly new, so I'm not not shaming her because of that. But I'm just realizing she's a salesperson. She's the person who goes in front of all the clients, very first thing, and talks about what the product is and how they can help them. And these people are going to have anywhere from very technical questions to like, yeah, I'll go with you because I like you, or I'm not going to go with you because I don't like you, right?
Yeah.
If there's anything between, she can mostly handle. But if there's but she was dealing with someone who had a lot of technical questions, and I was just thinking like, man, if she doesn't know a lot of this, like she should at least know some of it, but if she still doesn't know a lot of it, and we're just giving it to her out from our basic memory, I'm like, how has she been so successful at this? And I think it's what you're talking about, which is that, you're trying to tell a story and you never end up telling a story, but because you're so good at talking about how you're going to get to this story, they don't ask about it, they don't question it, they just move on to what you want to get to anyway, which is, I'm going to sell you this product anyway.
Sure. I mean, man, this taking a very different spin because like I did go through like a bunch of like different talks and stuff throughout my time, and I've gotten very picky about it because it's something that like I guess someone else found out was good in me, and I personally just like didn't realize it at the time because like I was like 8, 9, like really really young, right? And the shy kid, 8 or 9 years old, you kind of sit around doing math or whatever, and for whatever reason I think the curriculum changed around that time in Ontario, where you had to start doing like speeches and stuff, right? You had to like do like a in your class and at your school and then between schools and stuff and all that stuff, depending on how good you are. And for whatever reason, I was just a natural, right? I could just get up there and start talking, and then all the teachers and stuff noticed that, and so there's like 8, 9-year-old Calvin, like at the school assembly for like Remembrance Day or whatever, and reading out all these like poems and things that like, hey, this is Remembrance Day or whatever, and there's just like this 8 or 9-year-old when there's like a bunch of teachers and stuff instead that could be doing it, but they're like, we're gonna foster this, we're gonna let Calvin like get in front of a crowd a bit more often, and that continued on and on and on, and eventually I just got really comfortable.
Cool.
So
I think maybe I had 1 or 2 different competitions kind of like that, but I never had. I never did that sort of stuff myself. I
was forced to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're really good at it and if you're that young, they want to get you into as much as you can, and because the idea is like you don't know what's out there, you don't know what the different competitions are, so you have to need someone to show you what the competitions are, and then now.
It was mandatory. It was a part of our like literature class or whatever, right? Where like you had to like read and then give a speech about something, right? It'd be some topic somewhere, okay, and then that would continue, and then that was a part of like a inter-school competition that eventually you kept moving forward in. And here's the funny thing about that, right? Like I got in front of the crowd again, 8 or 9-year-old talking about like robots and stuff. I'm an engineer now, so I mean that's kind of funny. I'm working in like automation and like robots and stuff, so that's kind of cool how it kind of comes full circle. But anyways, like I was like basically doing like a stand-up act about how robots were going to take over the world and we shouldn't like develop robots or anything. And like everyone loved it, the kids loved it, the teachers had a good laugh. And like the thing is, content-wise, because I was basically doing a stand-up act, it wasn't like your traditional like I verbal essay basically. And so in my school, everyone thought it was great and like I had good stage presence, but because the content that I was giving didn't exactly represent our school very well, I actually wasn't chosen to like represent our school.
Oh my god, it's a stupid politics game. So they don't choose the best one. They don't choose the one that's like, oh, that's interesting, that's actually good speaking wise. They go, no, which one is actually going to give us the most clout for our school in general? Not even
clout. You're like 8 or 9, right? Like I think the person that got invited instead was like, oh, here's like why global warming is bad or something.
Oh
right?
My god, some stupid political activists.
And like
stuff.
they were basically reciting a script. And like the thing is, like I gave the little speech a couple of times because you have to go through the levels, right? So your classroom and then like in front of the school and all that stuff, right? And every single time that I did it, including all the practice sessions and like dry rehearsals and stuff, right? Like the talk was slightly different because it was, something that I was basically doing like an improv act in front, right?
Yeah.
And so they didn't like that. They're like, what if he's a loose cannon and he just like says something he shouldn't?
Oh
Because he's 8 or
my
9.
God,
right?
that's so dumb because you basically you're stifling creativity that way because now and you're stifling individualism. So there's two different ways. There's the individualism, which is they want you to be a mouthpiece. They don't want you to be Calvin. They want you to be a mouthpiece for whatever school you're going to. Right? Yeah. You're basically interchangeable. Then the creativity part is that they say, oh yeah, do whatever you want, write about something that you're going to enjoy, something that you actually like talking about. And then they say, no. Then when you go to submit it, they go, well, we didn't want to go this route. We wanted to go this route instead. But they don't say it, but it's shown in their final decision. And I thought it was only something recently that started happening where people are chosen not because of their credits, but because of the topics or the things they represent. I thought that was just a new phenomenon, but I guess not. I guess it was more hard steered nowadays, like in 2022. But you said it was 9. You were 9 or 10 when this happened, right? Or 8 or 9.
Yeah, I was pretty young. I can't
So
remember.
I guess it was
definitely around 10 years old.
So even then as well, where people were basically doing all these like social activist stuff for clout. And so if you had the amount of times I'm now looking back now, the amount of times that we talked about freaking global warming and crap in school is ridiculous. Like
it was a lot, but it was like the trendy thing at the time, right? It's like how as soon as the pandemic hit, all the medical courses were like, "Hey, so let's talk about this pandemic."
But even now it's still a thing, right? Like you hear about all the news about the climate activist people, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to come across as global warming doesn't exist, but like there's definitely like a threshold for how much it affects your daily life and how much you actually put forward in it.
Exactly. Like especially in Canada, I think we recently got a benefit for climate change. Remember? We got a certain amount of money back.
I can't exactly remember, but I always knew that there's like electric cars and all these different things that you can do to try to get some money back.
I'm gonna go check your account. You should have gotten a credit from Canada about climate change. About some kind of climate thing. It's like I think it was like $90 or something. Everyone got it. Everyone got it. Like I looked at my account and I thought for a second that they took it away, and I was like so pissed off. And then I realized that they gave it to me, and I was still just pissed off. and the reason why I'm pissed off about it is because they give all that. Like think about how many people are in Canada, right? Like what's the population? Like what, 20 million, something like that?
It's not. Well, I think it's like the last I checked was like 30, but I can't remember the exact
somewhere
number.
Around 20, 30 million, right? Nowhere near the States. But if everyone gets like $100 because of climate change, that's a huge amount of money that's just given back. That could have gone to something a lot better. That could have been more useful.
Depends on how you want to argue it, right? Like I've had these conversations with some older folk who question how the tax money is being spent. So
I know
$90 in our hands is debatably better than like.
No, okay. I guess if you go that way, but then again, if you give it to everybody, is it on average better? Yes, but then it just comes back to the whole point of like how does government spend all the money somewhat well.
Yeah.
And that's a big question. Anyways, we're gonna go back to the whole speaking parts about it. But so what I'm getting at is that I think it's ridiculous that because even though you think you're most qualified, now whether or not you're tooting your own horn or not, I don't know.
10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how good can you be for a 10-year-old, right? Like, are you the next Greta Thunberg?
Oh my God.
So because you're not speaking what their social points are, it gets super. I find that super annoying and disrespectful to like the people that should have done it.
Yes and no, right? Like here's the thing. Like I definitely was a little bit more loose in the way that I presented topics and stuff, but it wasn't necessarily the topic itself that like definitely held me back because they kind of did the token like, well, you were quote unquote a finalist, so why don't you come listen to like the interschool talks anyways, right? I'm 10, I don't want to be in class, so I'm like, sure, I'll go on a field trip and go listen to someone else talk, right?
I don't know. I think if I was 10, I think I would have just wanted to stay in class for something like that and listen to people go on and on about like as I said, reading a script.
Well, here's the thing, right? Other schools didn't do that.
Really? Okay.
So the few that I remember, because like it's been a long time, right? Mm-hmm. But they weren't necessarily even like political agendas. It's just like someone was just like, I have a hobby in like stamp collecting, so like I'm going to talk about why people collect stamps.
Okay.
And then another one was just like, I think outer space is cool, so let's talk about like astronauts and black holes.
Okay.
Right? Like none of that had any political agenda.
But it was just your school.
So it was. So again. I just think back on this and like that's probably what happened. But like for me, the way it panned out was they saw something like, wow, Calvin's good at speaking, so like we're gonna make him speak. But then we're not going to make him speak in front of everyone because he's a little loose. So in front of our school, it was fine, but like
But in front of other schools, right? Because
Yeah.
there's probably like a district, there's probably like a district school board superintendent. Is that what they're called, right?
I don't even
Yeah,
remember.
it's this Skinner and his boss
Yeah,
from The Simpsons, right?
it's like
That's
a
the
Simpsons
mentality,
thing. Yeah, a little
right?
bit.
Or it's like they're in front of there, so all of a sudden they look at you, they say that, oh, you brought this kid that's a loose cannon. No, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit loose on it, right? Like you don't want.
I wasn't like swearing or anything.
Exactly.
Right?
You don't want. You're not gonna. And at that point, you're not gonna get the people that
Like
are
the
gonna
biggest thing that I noticed actually that I did that no one else did, and to this day I still like kind of do, is you borrow some theater elements when you're actually like presenting in a entertainment way, right?
Mhm.
And so again, 9 or 10, how good can you be? But everyone was super stiff, right? They would like stand there basically like arms together or like even at their side and just like start speaking into a mic or something, right?
Yeah.
For me, what made me so much of like a loose cannon was I was actually like walking around stage and like like prompting the crowd a little bit and like basically miming out certain actions and stuff that I would do. Like for example, right? Like I remember this joke because it fell flat a couple of times when I was like going through like the talk of like robots should or shouldn't take over the world basically. And there was one time when I was because I argued both sides because I was just like that's just what you do when you don't have anything better to do, you argue something else. So there was one time I was telling a story about how robots could actually be useful. Like what if there was a situation where you're in a place that you can't get help really quickly. All right, so someone is stuck in a tree, something, whatever, right? The little cartoon things, right? And so I would like mime out this little story about, I'm walking down the street. I noticed that there's this like old lady's pet in the tree or something, and I'm like walking with hands on my side, pointing at certain points to kind of say, oh, what if there's like a tree over there? All these things, right? And so like I would like immerse myself into this story, kind of like with my actions and stuff too, and that's what the crowd started to follow and get behind as well. But then because maybe it's just because of budget, they didn't have a lapel mic for me to like walk around with. Like they didn't like that. That was like the one thing that I did that no one else did.
Really, that's great because that was like one of the first one-on-one things I learned about when I had to present. It's like don't be a part of the mic where you're just standing there, right? It's like move around, engage with the crowd, make yourself a little bit more present. It's why a lot of lecturers and good presenters they always walk back and forth, even just like walking to and from the crowd. You're engaging the crowd, even if just to the extent of I'm just going out and reaching out my hands and like making all these things in the air, right? And because if you're just standing there, it's just like it's not like you're giving a declaration. It's not like you're a political leader behind a podium.
I am now the president of this school.
Exactly.
I am now declaring that this is now law.
Exactly. It's not like you're doing dictatorship all over and everything. Like where all of a sudden Emperor Calvin is taking over with his awesome speech skills, right? But you need to be someone engaging with it, and if they told you not to, then
they didn't tell me not to. That's the thing. They let me go all the way through, but just when it came down to representing our school, they didn't choose me.
I don't know. I don't know why. Like, and the person that they chose was just
cardboard standing in front of the mic. Hey, let's talk about global warming.
There was someone in the back who probably said like, we need to do this, and this is what was going to probably give us more points or give us more wins or saying like, oh, this is the safer option, and therefore it's the one that cost them the victory most likely in the end.
Yeah, we didn't win, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly, and I doubt you probably broke like top 3 or top 5, however many people were there.
Honestly, I don't remember how many were there. I just remember going like, hey, you're a finalist, why don't you go to this like inter-school thing and like listen. And I was like, sure, I don't really want to sit in class. And so, yeah, it was like an all-day thing. We left at like 8 in the morning. I got there at like 9 or something and just, sat there through lunch. We had to bring a lunch, of course, because, we're going to another school or something. So,
Yep.
like, why would they give us a lunch?
Yeah.
And then we listened to another round in the afternoon, and then we took the bus back, and that was it. And I was like, cool, I didn't do class. I could basically, like, just sit there and kind of listen to people talk about, like, stamps and black holes and stuff all day.
Did you not get pissed off when you saw the kid that they chose? And then you're like, oh, wow.
Okay. This is where I kind of out myself a little bit, right? Because I was like, the person who was like, standing, the cardboard in front of the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was kind of cute.
Oh my god, dude.
I was like 10. And I was like, yeah, sure.
Keeping your pants, man. So did you go? So wait, was it announced before? Did they announce the finalists during that? Like, did you know who was going on stage for your school at the event, or did you know beforehand?
Beforehand.
Oh, so that's why you went.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
okay,
no.
that's
Yes and
why.
no. Yes
Okay,
and no, right?
Now it makes sense.
Yes and no.
Because I was gonna make a comment thinking like, oh, the person who's asking you to go to the teacher is this also the
No,
same
the teacher
teacher?
asked. The teacher asked. All
I
the
know-
teachers asked.
I don't know, but I understand. But what I'm saying is, I have it in my head that the teacher that asked is probably the same one that cut you out. That would have been funny.
Honestly, it could have been.
And then the second part of it is you're like, okay, so then if I knew the girl that I thought was cute and I kind of like was going, then yes, I would have gone. Because otherwise, I would have not gone to that. I think as a kid, I think that still would have been very boring to just sit there. Because like even then, think about it, we're 8, 9, 10. We probably didn't have phones. It was very early.
No.
Like there's no games on the phones either way, right? Like on most of
No.
I had like Tetris or something on one of my phones, and so you actually sit there and actually listen to it. And as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, you don't care. Like
Yeah.
as much as you think. As much as people think that kids are very engaged and very intelligent, like there's a lot of 8, 9, 10-year-olds that just don't care. They will sit down, play video games, they'll read their books, they'll play
The
Barbies.
iPad babies.
Huh?
The iPad babies. You grew up with an iPad, so you always have to have an electronic screen.
Well, I
in
think
front of
now
you.
it's even worse because the iPad, even in our day, it was still bad. It was like I would just
the
only-
Game Boys. Yeah.
Game Boys was one, right? But that was one where you can take it away, and the reason why you could take it away because its only function is to play as a game.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
But nowadays, if you take away a kid's phone, then they'll just say, well, my parents need it for me because I need to call them when I get back from when I do this.
I never thought about it that way.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, let's think about it, right? So the reason that kids had phones, the reason that I knew a lot of my friends in, like, elementary school had phones is because their parents gave it to them because they walked home from school, they stayed after school a lot, they went to go visit a friend's house, so the parents always had a quick lifeline to their kid. And if they didn't have it, and if the kid didn't answer, then it's like, well, either something happened or some kid happened. I'll give you a story about this actually.
I have a story too.
Yeah. So I think when I was, I don't know what age I was, but I was pretty young. And I made a friend on the street. His name was, I'll call him M. So I think I told someone I'm going. Oh no, I didn't tell my mom. I think I said that I was just going. Oh no, I remember what it was. I told her I was going over to M's house. And we're gonna like play games or watch something. It was at a time where he downloaded all of Pokemon, like the original series, and we started watching on his like old brick of a desktop, right?
Oh my god.
So she said, "Well," and I don't have a phone at the time, right? Because I'm young, I didn't have a job, and my mom didn't want to pay for me to have a phone. So she said, "Well, when you get there, ask if you can call me right away, so I know you got over." And this is like 1 block away, right?
Yeah.
But she's being safe. So I go over there, and I completely forgot to phone her,
Oh my god.
right? So then all of a sudden and I think she was trying to call the house because she had the number. But the problem is that it was that his parents were also away, so it was just me and him at the house. And his parents told him that if they're not home, he doesn't answer the phone, no matter what. So you get into this cycle of I left, I didn't call her, and now she's calling the house, and no one's picking up.
Oh my god.
I think like half an hour to an hour later, we get a knock on the door, and someone comes in, and we go, "Hi, it's police." Yeah, and then he goes in walkie-talkie. Yeah, they're here. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh my god.
And I realized that my mom called the cops because she thought I got kidnapped. And she and then I came back and I was like, well, I'm just gonna go home, ma'am. I'm gonna go check my mom. And my mom was like kind of crying a bit because she thought I got kidnapped. Right? It was like her first time.
Yeah, I have a similar story actually.
Yeah. So yeah, hear yours, and I'll continue my point about the phone stuff.
Jesus. So this is middle school, a little bit later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got my first phone around here, give or take, I think.
Actually, a quick question: did you pay for your phone, or did your parents pay for it?
No, but the thing is, it was like a prepaid. So the idea was that you had like
a limited amount of minutes.
You had a limited amount of minutes, but that's all you needed if you only needed to call your kid, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it was like a one-time fee of like $100 for like a year or something. So it was like whatever. Because like as a kid, you have like a minute to go like, "Hi, mom, I'm here," and that's it.
Yeah.
So you could do that 100 times, and that'll be fine for the year, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up doing. But I got this phone, and so I was new because like I didn't walk around with a phone. I grew up in the suburbs, right? I biked everywhere. I would bike like 50 kilometers somewhere and be like, cool, I'll be back in the day, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, we were going to someone else's house to do like a group project or something, right? And they were a little bit further away. I didn't have my bike or anything, so we were just walking. We walked all the way over. We did our thing, right? And I forgot to call because, first time with the phone. And so I just kind of went. I didn't even tell anyone. I was kind of like, screw it. I'm like 13 now. I'm old. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right? So like I get over there, we do our thing, and then I'm like walking back home, and then I check my phone. It's like, oh, I've got like 6 or 7 calls that like I didn't pick up. Right? And I was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
So I get home, get a mouthful, and I'm like, Yeah, I probably deserve that. And then I go back to school the next day, right? And the teacher goes like, Calvin, where were you last evening or whatever after school, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I went to like such and such's houses to do that project that you just gave us, right? Like, call your parents. I was like, oh, so they reached out to the teacher and stuff too.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No, that's the first thing, right? Because sometimes some teachers will be that extra reach out
Yeah.
to help out kids for it. So back to my point about phones is like, back then it was half and half. It was like you get some situations like me where I didn't have one, but that means that whenever I went, if I went to someone's house or something like that, my mom wanted, my dad wanted me to know where I was going. And then you have situations like you where it was starting to become the more norm where, hey, here's your phone. This has a set amount of minutes. It's only used for us and that's it. And they give it to you, right? And then you call it for whatever. And a lot of kids, and now that so back then it was kind of becoming more of a normal thing. But you know, at the time, phones didn't have games, didn't have like all these extra apps.
It had
on there,
like
right?
Snake.
Yeah, they had Snake, they had Tetris, and Solitaire.
Something like that, yeah.
The 3 base games that I think you can play on Google as well if the internet ever goes down. Or no, it's a dinosaur. It's a dinosaur.
The
game.
dinosaur jumping in
Yeah,
Chrome.
the dinosaur jumping game. So nowadays, you get kids who have iPads, who have phones, and they have all these games on them. But then, so I don't know how a teacher deals with it because haven't been in a classroom. Because we've all teaching positions that we've been in has been with high school or university people.
Yeah.
So it's a very different mentality of how to deal with it, right?
You think so, but yeah.
Well, with some people, some classes they don't care. Some classes really do care. But I'll finish my point, then I'll go on to this next point about what I mean by some people care, some people don't. Is that if you go to elementary school, if a kid has a phone, then the question is, do you take it away from the kid? And if you take it away from the kid, how long before you give it back? And if they say, oh, I need to call my mom, it's like, well, listen, if your mom calls, I'll pick it up for you. And I'll say that you were using it in class. That's the way I would probably handle it, but that's one way to think about it. Now, back to your whole point about why some people care, some people don't. Some university professors do not give a crap. And I knew 1 or 2 that really gave a crap. It was one of my business courses. And funny enough, it was a business course being taught by an engineer.
Of course.
He was the associate dean or something, and he was teaching one of the accounting courses.
Oh.
It was really weird. And he says, he said laptops were fine, but he said that if you smiled behind your laptop, like if you smiled at something, and there's nothing to laugh about, he made a joke about how there's nothing to smile about because this is accounting. This is not fun. So if you smile behind it, or if you talk a lot during it, if you be very disruptive with phones and things like that, then you're out of the class entirely. Okay. And he says, remember. And I remember 2 girls did something like that where they either laughed or they're on their phones or they're snickering it, and then you just kick them out. And he completely stopped the class and said, you guys got to go. And that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought there was 2 different points to it. I thought there was I have 2 different ways of feeling about that. I could either be being like, yes, good for him, because they were being disruptive, and they were being where I would say even somewhat disruptive.
Well, how big was the class? How big was the class?
It was the first year or second year accounting, so it was like 100.
Okay, pretty big kid.
Yeah, exactly. It was a pretty big one, right? But then you get to the point where it's a 200 person lecture. If they're on their phones or they're on their laptops, what difference is it to you? Like, okay, listen, as a lecturer, you have to go up, give your speech, and have people listen to it, right? We're going all the way back around. And you want to make sure some people are engaged. Now, if you've ever gone to the teaching class, like whether in high school, elementary school, or even university, you're not going to get full participation.
It's rare.
Exactly.
Sometimes you do, but it's rare.
Yeah, sometimes you do, but especially you get it in the smaller classes, like, when you get 30, 40 people, something like that. But when you're at, like, first year, second year class where there's 100 people or more, you don't expect to get the full 100 people to participate 100% of the time. They have 5 other courses or 6 other courses.
There's also just not enough time in the class, right?
Exactly.
Say there's 100 people and everyone has like 30 seconds. That's half an hour gone.
Exactly. You get 50 minutes of teaching.
Yeah.
Right? And that's it. So why are you getting uppity? And here's the thing. If I remember correctly, they weren't, as far as I know, they weren't being the problem. They weren't like huge. Whether or not because I was far away from them, or I think it was whether or not because I was far away from them, and maybe the people that were close by were caring more about it, because we'll get some people who you're sitting behind the 1-2 people that can't stop talking. You can't hear lecture, right? But if they're doing that, that's their own choice. It comes back to the whole point of it's their own choice. They're wasting their time being there and not listening. they might as well just go to the library and hang out there instead. They're going there to the class because either A, they have to mandatory be there, or B, because they're I'll say programmed to feel like they have to go to class to learn something, even though they're just talking.
Yeah, it's it's a little bit of I can see the the lecturer side of it a little bit more because like I've been in that situation a little bit more after the pandemic, but like it's a situation where teaching has gotten really, really bad in the sense that you just don't feel any gratitude because like students they're so burnt out from like at home teaching and everything, right? And so when you kind of like use your time teaching because to an academic, because I'm going to assume that engineer and all that stuff teaching the course, that they do research on the side as a professor, right? And that research is how they get renowned. They lose a lot of time teaching, and if they don't get any gratitude or benefit to it, then it's doubly waste of their time.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so like I get it from that point of view. If that is, again, I'm assuming a little bit here, but like it does feel extremely bad, and it is a way to like burn yourself out too really quickly doing a thankless job for people who don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. I think if you talk about...
It's a little extreme, though, to like kick two people out, but...
Listen, this guy was pretty extreme as well. This guy, I think it was the same guy, or he was part of the same prof, where he says, like, I worked with this government mission, like, weapon agency, and when we walked into the meeting, we had to put our phones off air, and we didn't look at them for like 2-3 hours. I'm like, okay, guy, guess what? We're not in the government. We're in a first-year university class. Get over it.
Yeah, it's a difference of expectations and difference of like timing, right? Because like I think you did too. Then at this point, like we grew up at a point where like phones and technology and stuff didn't really like get into our more everyday lives. So we were a little bit older, yeah. Right? Because I got my first phone at the end of middle school, something like that.
I remember when it was like in grade 7 or 8. No, actually before that, when I got Wi-Fi.
Oh my god!
And I was telling everyone, like, I got Wi-Fi, I can do this, and everyone's like, cool, we all have that. I'm like, okay, sure. Like Wi-Fi was a new thing, right?
Yeah. I was a little bit later to get like all like the tech stuff, like at least usable tech stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it just wasn't as much of a big deal to me. Like if I show up to class and like I turn off my phone or whatever, it doesn't bother me, right? It's like the same way if you go to a movie, you get told to turn off your phone. It's like I'm not gonna be mad. I'm gonna turn off my phone. Yeah, right. It's the same idea, really. But like some people kind of don't have that mentality, I guess.
Yeah. Honestly, I get pissed off when people don't turn off their phones in movies. And here's the thing: I tell my girlfriend all the time, we're gonna go to movies. I'm like, because that's probably the few times I actually turn off my phone. I don't even turn it off when I go to sleep. I just leave it on the side of my bed so that way someone calls me. But during a movie, because I'm with every other people as well, I turn it off entirely. I think it's just because of a habit I've had, and the reason why is because one. Like a couple times, I tell my dad to do the same thing. I said, "Dad, did you turn off your phone?" He's like, "Yeah, I did." And then halfway through the movie, it goes off, and I'm like, "Dad." And my girlfriend, she goes, she puts on silence. I'm like, "No, that's not the same," because there's gonna be some app that's gonna go off that you didn't turn off, and it's gonna bypass all these options. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like
some
random app that you've never used in a long time, but you forgot to turn off notifications, and it's gonna randomly go off during the movie.
God, that's another thing that like now that you're just mentioning that, I'm not gonna go on this tangent. I don't care. Like I don't get why everyone has to have an app for everything now. That's like it goes in line with our like a little bit later adopting tech. So like some things I just don't care. Like for example, like the biggest thing that bothers me like crazy, and this is again someone who's like tangentially related to like healthcare and healthcare data and stuff, right? Like everyone is obsessed, like absolutely obsessed with having like a smartwatch or something to like monitor the heart rate and everything, right? It's like why? Why do you care? They always go like, oh, I got like X amount of like hours of sleep. It's just like, cool. I mean, does that actually matter at the end of the day? But why are you tracking all this just to like have a footprint and a receipt of everything that you've done for like no reason? Yeah. If you're a part of a study, if you have health concerns, sure. But if you're just some dude who goes like, well, I need to have a smartwatch so that I can like monitor my heart rate all the time. It's just like, are you prone to like heart condition? If you are, fine, great, good to be proactive. Yeah. If you're not, why?
Yeah, I don't get it either. It's the same reason when people say, "Oh, I gotta get my steps in today," and unless you're trying to actively be healthy, like when I say actively, I mean like you're actually trying to make sure you work out enough times during the day, or you're playing Pokemon Go and you're trying to hatch an egg through your incubator, right? There's no real other reason, and like I said, a health condition is like the main thing. I think that's probably what it started off as. That's what I imagine. Here's what it started off as. It started off as a app that was meant to help people who had some sort, maybe not disability, but had some sort of health related problem, and they need some way to track it. Because, as you said, for heart condition, for your physical activity, someone who's really obese, you need to keep track of how much you're actually walking, because too many times you see those TLC shows where they go to the doctor and the doctor says you have to get on this diet and in 3 months we'll do the surgery, and if you don't stick to it, then they're not going to do it, right? And then the person goes, yes. 3 months later, they never did the diet, and they're lying and they're doing stuff like that. That's the reason why you want to have something like that, right? Because then you can go, because then if they say, oh yeah, I did this, that, and they're like, okay, sure, let's check your Fitbit, and then it doesn't show that they walk as much, right? I think it's just a way of people to be organized. I think that's what it comes down to, is that people want something that's everyone has a phone. Everyone wants something at a touch of a button. And the best example is a coin flip app.
Oh my God.
Right? And because coins are everywhere. You just need to carry a coin on you. But yet we have an app for that.
Yeah.
Why? It's as simple as flipping a coin. It doesn't have to be like a loony or a toonie or anything like that. It can just be a regular coin. I have a Star Wars coin that has R2-D2 and the Rebel signal and the Rebel sign on it, right? That I use for D&D. But yeah, and then I think I talked about it with my boss. My boss had no idea what it was, because he didn't have the concept that he was never carrying something like that on him. So I think it comes from this idea that there has to be an app for everything, because people know that if you make an app and if it gets enough traction, you can put ads on it and you make money.
Oh my!
That's why people want to make apps
so.
for everything, right? I think it comes from the consumer point of view of, I just want to have everything on one device, and if I can, and some people like that idea of tracking everything. Like, some people like the whole idea because they want to go up and tell someone, like, hey, yeah, I did 10,000 steps today. And someone goes, well, I did 11,000 steps today. And it's like, well, shut up.
Oh, my God.
Right? It's the same people when they try to get into running. When you start talking about how much you ran and other people just get annoyed by you.
Oh, my God.
Right?
Yeah,
I think it's the same, but then you get this moral superiority. I think it's the same type of people who do that. And as well as the idea that some people like, it's the whole Jurassic Park. Do you know the line from Jurassic Park?
Tell the line.
Okay, so it's from Jeff Goldblum. He's talking with the scientists. The scientists are telling him about this great idea. Jeff Goldblum says, you guys spent so much time thinking about whether you can do something that you never stopped to think about whether or not you should.
Oh, okay, that one.
Yeah. So he's talking about the dinosaurs, right? And so in this case, we're talking about technology, where it turns like you're thinking so much about how can we put this into an app that you're not thinking about, or how much that you need to have an app for this. You're not thinking about why you need an app for this. Why should this be tracked? Why do I need to have this smartwatch on my thing? That's the big thing that I hate, is that, especially for work, is that I'm always connected to my work.
Yeah, that's another thing I was going to mention.
A smartwatch like that makes it even worse, because now it's no longer, oh, I left my phone at the house. Oh, I turned my phone off. It's like, well, you have a Fitbit. Did you not get it from your Fitbit or whatever?
Yeah.
And I don't like it. And some people do. Okay, I get it. All right, it's the same people that like to wear Bluetooth headsets. Like, it's the same people that wore Bluetooth headsets back in our early days.
Oh yeah,
all the time, right? You see them walking down Toronto or walking down downtown Hamilton or whatever, and you see them wearing Bluetooth, and it's like, yeah,
I gotta make the business deal.
Exactly, making a business deal while you're like at Starbucks or something, right? Like, that typical stereotypical stuff. I think that's what it evolved into. I think it evolved from, now instead of wearing this stupid Bluetooth on your ear all the time, you now just replace your watch with an even smarter watch.
Oh, yeah. Dude, even like the idea of like watches in general, right? Like I know it's like a timeless piece of like men's fashion and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But like I just, for some reason, like I just never got into it. And so it bothers me a lot when like you start thinking about how to like accessorize and dress up and like do all this stuff with like around a watch, because it's supposed to be something that also shows your affluence, right? So if you're going to like a wedding or something, a lot of the times you're encouraged to actually put on a nicer watch.
Oh yeah.
I don't have one. So like it's just really weird and a really like odd concept to me. So like going even that step beyond to like, now I need to answer my emails on it is just like, I can't.
My wearing a watch came from the fact that I think my parents gave me a watch when I was young, and I kind of just got used to it. And it's not even like I don't wear a smartwatch. I wear a very nice what's it like? It's called like a Lige, Lige. Let me check right now. Lige? Oh, I'm just checking right now. Yeah, Lige. Yeah. Here, if you want to.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll show it to you after we finish recording. But yeah, it's a Lige, and it's a nice one. It actually has a technical stopwatch on it, but it broke, so it just tells time, which is all I need it for, right? And
like that's exactly how it is, right? Like either you grew up going like, hey, my parents gave me a watch or something, so you wear it all the time, or you don't. Like for me, I got into the habit of checking my phone for the time, and so even if I'm wearing a watch, I'll do that.
So I like my watch more because if I'm in a business meeting, I don't want to check my phone. And the reason why I don't want to check my phone is because I open my phone and not only do I get the time, I get emails, I get messages, I get a whole bunch of other stuff that all of a sudden I get to. How many times where you open up your phone, you see a message, and then you immediately stop whatever you're doing and check the message?
I have enough control to kind of be like, I'll do it later.
Oh, okay. Well, I sometimes do that, but the problem is if I'm in a business meeting and I see a business email go through, and I'm like, because now all of a sudden I'm in this meeting, I'm supposed to stay focused on the meeting, and now all of a sudden I just saw this email that I didn't see before come in, and now I'm like thinking about that now. That may be of a bigger concern.
Yeah, and I get that, and I tried that too, because like when we were writing our exams, you're not allowed to pull out your phone and check the time, and depending on where you're sitting, you might not be able to see the clock, so you don't know where and how much time you have left. So that's when I started wearing a watch, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I just couldn't get used to it. It just felt odd, right? And oh my god, I got a gift. The only watch that I got that wasn't like a $10 thing or something out of a cereal box was I got this like I think it was like a $60 watch in like middle school from this girl. And like I wore it a lot because it's just like, well, she went out of her way to give it to me.
Ooh, the girl's giving you gifts now.
Oh god, that's a story for another time.
All right, that'll be
but
another
either way, I wore it for a while, and it was like a really. The thing is, it was a watch that was branded around this anime that I loved as a middle schooler, right? And so she was just like, "Oh, I saw this. I know you really like this, so like I got it for you." And I was like, "Oh, that's really nice." And then I got her like a teddy bear or something as well for like Christmas or something, like a thank you. But anyways.
Base.
Anyways, so I wore that to death, but then like I realized that it was a watch that was like so ridiculously like hard to repair because it was one of those like light up touch watches, right? So you tapped the screen and then like the logo of like the anime or whatever would glow, and then it would, depending on which dots were like glowing, that would tell the time. Okay. And so because it was a touch watch with like at the time when you're like 14, 15 or something, right? Like touch technology, like the first touch thing that was like consumer was like I think the Nintendo DS, right? And that was also kind of buggy.
Nintendo DS and the iPod.
Oh right, the iPod Touch,
yeah,
right?
iPod
Stuff like
Touch.
that, right? So it was, I couldn't take it to any like watch shop to get it actually fixed or anything. Anytime that I think the battery eventually just died because at some point like it was getting really really unresponsive. And so I was like, I should get this like fixed somewhere. So I bring it to like a watch shop. Just like, I don't know what to do with this. And I was like, crap. And so it's just like in a box somewhere, like forever, like stowed away. But like that was the only time that I did, and it was the same idea, right? Where someone has to give you something somewhat sentimental for you to somewhat get used to it. But it was like a pain in the ass because I couldn't just like look at my wrist. I had to like touch it to like light it up, right?
You can't just go whip. Like I'm looking at my watch right now. Go whip and then go, okay, cool, the time is this. All right, cool, done.
Yeah, so like I just never got around watches. What I do instead for like, the accessories to make me look more like affluent or whatever is I just wear a bracelet.
Yeah, but I don't know what. I don't know with the in things of phone is that you don't need to watch anymore. It is a men's fashion thing. The amount of people who I talk about, like it's the same thing with like cars and suits, where it's like everyone will have a car. But it's just a question about how much you care about your car. So, some people will have a watch, but some people really, really care about watches. Like, I don't know where, maybe it is a men's fashion thing. I don't know why.
It is a men's fashion thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you know where it kind of came from?
It's again the idea that like they can get kind of expensive and kind of like designer and all that, right? And so again, there's probably some watch expert out there who probably like you're like off the mark, but from my understanding, it's pretty much like it's a sign of like influence and like affluence and like wealth and stuff, and it's just kind of like carried over throughout the years, right? Because like you remember the whole Rolex thing and all that, you can wear basically a house on your wrist, and if you can afford to do that, then you have money.
True. I guess it comes from like the idea of like pocket watches, right? If you're a little bit higher, it's like, ooh, this is what's the time now?
Yeah, and we'll talk more about like fashion another time because like I have lots of strong opinions about fashion too and how I got into fashion and stuff. But
you're in fashion.
A little bit.
How did you get into fashion?
Oh god, fashion may not be like the proper like term for it, but like dressing properly and like men's style and stuff like that.
Well, I think that's just how much you care about your apperance. And how you
yeah.
But I know some people care a lot more about that than others.
But either way, right? The thing is, like, it's something that maybe someone else listening might start paying attention to now too, right? It's like when you see someone's outfit, right? And it happens a lot more when you look at like girls' clothing because they're a bit more open with like all the stuff that they can wear and what choices they have. But like what really ties together like outfits and stuff is actually how you accessorize, because your accessories and how they look can actually change the whole like vibe and like not appearance, but like style between like a casual look, a more like dressed up look or anything very easily. And so if you have like a watch that can either be like very like, oh, I'm wearing like a house on my wrist, then it's more like a statement kind of like thing versus something that's like smaller. Like for example, like we wear iron rings all the time, right?
Yep.
And so that's like a smaller thing that's a little bit different, and that also shapes the way that you like you appear, because now you have this bit of silver that like sticks out in contrast to everything else you're wearing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of that and how you can kind of like dress around it. And as men, you have infinitely less options because it's a little less common, although it's more common nowadays for like earrings and piercings and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so like you get less options, and so the ones that are staple are typically like a bracelet or a watch more so because bracelets can sometimes look kind of feminine. A necklace from time to time, but even then they can sometimes look kind of feminine. The only thing that really like is very like masculine in its like origins and stuff is like a big watch.
Okay.
And so that's why it becomes a big cornerstone in like a lot of men's fashion.
Interesting.
Style.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's why a lot of men, when they wear necklace, I wore a necklace for a time, but I never wore it out. I always wore it inside my shirt. And so, and like usually the people who wear it outside the shirt are either very religious or thugs.
Yeah.
So like, you know, not to
again, that's the idea.
Not to stereotype people, right? But like, you know, that's the common one. So like, you know, how often do you see like a heterosexual male
just have a ton of chains?
Exactly. Yeah, just have a ton of chains. Or like I did as well. Like when I think my grandparents for my confirmation, because just in case everyone knows, I grew up in like not Catholic household. I just grew up in a Catholic school. My grandparents got me a gold necklace with a cross on it. I wore that for a bit until the necklace actually broke off. But yeah,
that's the idea though, right? Where like depending on like the style of your accessories, it changes the way your entire outfit comes across.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a suit and instead of a tie you have a bunch of chains, you look more like a thug gangster type.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Just by changing one small thing. And so again, the only like centerpiece that like really can be very versatile and like doesn't give off like an unintended feel a lot of the times is your watch.
That's true. Like probably some people in the fashion industry will be like, no, this is how fashion is now.
They're going to skewer me, but like
yeah.
generally speaking.
But look at like fashion run shows now. Look at what guys wear. It's just ridiculous.
Okay, there is a difference between like fashion, trendy fashion, and high fashion, and then like style and like everyday menswear.
That is the one nice thing that I like is that I'm not into fashion. I really don't put a lot of thought into what I wear. So I'm really glad that guys have the better end of the stick, which is it's mainly one or two different main types of outfits for big events. Like, for example, at a wedding, right? If you go to a wedding and you're a guy, everyone's wearing a suit, everyone's wearing a tie, everyone's wearing some sort of dress shirt with a tie or bow, right? It's different variations of the exact same style. But with girls, you can go like there could be like 100 different girls there, and there could potentially be 100 different outfits entirely.
Yeah, and like that's the thing that like I had this conversation again with like a bunch of girls when we were talking about like convocation and like party dresses and stuff, right? It's like, well, as a dude, you wear the same suit to everything, and you're fine, you're safe, you don't have to worry about it, right?
Yeah.
But as a girl, a lot of the times you get noticed. Oh, you wore that dress before already, so it becomes a bit more of like a headache. Now, my counter argument is, now I don't actually have an opportunity to wear anything that like makes me feel unique or confident or like.
I think that's a scam. I think that's like that was a marketing tool. Same thing with like the whole wedding rings back in like the 20s such, where it's like someone probably told girls that some high end person, just like how Princess Diana normalized the whole white wedding dress, right? Someone normalized the idea that if you wear the same outfit twice, you're tacky. Right? Somehow.
Maybe.
I don't know how it started. I don't know the history of it, but I imagine that's how something started, where a very high-end celebrity, high-end person thought about that, said, yeah, I'm not going to wear the same thing twice, and everyone just adopted it. And now clothing companies are like cha-ching all the time because you know, especially for women's fashion, because they know that women will typically wear it once or twice, depending on the type.
That's why dress rentals are a thing.
Exactly, right? That's why like tuxedo rentals are
rarer.
Even I think those are even. I would imagine those are more common because, or maybe, I don't know. It depends on the guy. Because like, for me, I would want to buy a suit, but the problem is that if I ever drastically change in like size or weight throughout my years,
that's what tailoring's for, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is that when you have it tailored to you, you're tailored it to you at the time. Like, are you assume like, you know, for example, like remember when I was in second year, I lost a lot of weight.
That's
coming
true.
back from summer, right? So then all of a sudden a lot of things didn't fit me. But now that I'm after
Well, that's
school.
when you buy cheap suits, right?
Huh?
So this is the system that like you should follow when you're like first getting into like suiting and stuff, right? Like when you're younger and you're still in school or whatever, right? You buy a cheapish enough suit that somewhat fits and it's fine, it gets the job done. And then once you actually are in a situation where your everyday life is a bit more, I don't want to call it monotonous, but repetitive is another bad word. But when things are kind of like more stable, then you also have income now. That is when you can start to invest into higher quality suits that are more tailored because there's a less chance of you actually drastically changing weight anymore. Right?
That's true.
Because when you're in school and stuff, yeah, that'll happen a lot. So you kind of go from it after.
Got it. Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of weight now, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll talk about exercise and fitness.
Yeah, well,
another
maybe
time.
we will another time because that's pretty much all the time we have today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's like been over an hour. Jeez, man, we had a lot to talk about. We started off with speaking in front of people. We diverged a bit.
We went on our tangent.
Yeah, we came back to speaking, then we went all the way off to like fashion. So that would be nice. That would be probably a good name for the podcast or a good name for the episode. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I'm Zach.
I'm Calvin.
And it's good to talk to you. We'll see you in the next episode.